You're listening to The Grapevine on 99.3 County FM. I'm Lynn Pickering. Now that summer is over, schools have reopened, COVID-19 case counts are surging in some areas. Many families are wondering if it's safe to get together for special occasions like Thanksgiving and Christmas. The National Institute on Aging, under the direction of Dr. Samir Sinha, and in collaboration with public health and infectious disease experts, has developed an online calculator to assess your risk of contracting the disease. The COVID-19 Visit Risk Calculator is free and accessible to all. For more information, I'm joined by Dr. Sinha. Welcome back to The Grapevine.
Thanks for having me, Lynn.
Let's first talk about why and how you developed this online calculator.
Yeah, this is something that became a labor of love last year, because obviously with this pandemic, there were tons of questions that people started asking themselves that after the lockdown, the main lockdown ended, people were starting to wonder, what's it safe to do and how do you do this? What's risky, what's not risky? And there was just so much different information out there. I think it was making people scared to kind of, interact with one another, or sometimes even worse off, some people might actually be interacting in a way that wasn't safe or could be safer. And so it really started as a project last year where I had a team of students and colleagues who we came together and we basically said, well, what are the things that could help a person understand what are the risks associated with meeting or gathering or visiting with others? And then can we, allow them to choose a bunch of items and then give them back a score based on expert input and opinion. And that's when we launched our first decision aid right before U.S. Thanksgiving, actually, and our winter holidays. But then what happened was the Public Health Agency of Canada approached us in the spring of this year, and they said, you guys have developed the best tool around the world. They looked at, similar calculators that had come out, and they said, yours is the most comprehensive and great. They said, here's the challenge. It takes 10 minutes to do. So they said, if you would collaborate with us, we'd love if you could create a shorter 3-minute version that can allow people to get more of a quick answer. And for those who want to spend a bit more time and put more information in, they could get a more accurate answer from a more detailed, what we call decision aid. So that was the birth of the calculator and the decision aid. And what's been great, Lynn, is that over the last 2 months since we launched it, we've had hundreds of thousands of people come, check it out. And what's really neat is about 12% of the users are returning users. They come back on a regular basis because they were using it to think about the risk of attending a wedding. Now people are saying, I'm going to go to a concert. And so it's been great to see the positive response. And so what we do every 3 months is we update it based on feedback that we get from users who send us comments and the evolving science. And so we're now relaunching our third version, which basically takes into account larger gatherings. It takes into account younger age groups in particular, and it allows people to tell us that the people they're meeting with, when they're not really sure about their status or around certain things, we give them that opportunity to put some more uncertainty into the visits they're planning to give them kind of more accurate scores and an ability to kind of better understand their risk when they're getting together.
Well, as you say, there are two versions, and I took the 3-minute one because I wanted to know if it was safe for my family to come to the county from Toronto for Thanksgiving. And so let's go through some of the questions. Where you live, your age, gender, whether you've been vaccinated, active COVID cases in your community, how many people will be at the gathering, age of the oldest person, health conditions of those in attendance, and then also if those in the group work or socialize with others, perhaps at a facility of some kind. If they've had COVID-19 or been close to someone who has had COVID or they're not feeling well, whether the event is indoors or outdoors. So I answered all the questions and click submit. And then it gives you your risk rating, which is either low, moderate, high, or very high. And I was happy to see that my risk rating was low. So
And right before that, Lynn, what did you think your risk was? Because we asked you right before you get our rating, we asked you to tell us what you think it's going to be too.
I thought it would be low because our family's fully vaccinated. The family who are becoming are fully vaccinated. My husband and I are fully vaccinated. We're in an area where we do have COVID-19 cases, not surging the way they are in other areas. So I thought it would be fairly low, and it was. So now we have to try and make plans for them to come for Thanksgiving. But that was the short version. So with a longer version, what's the purpose of that? What are the other questions that are asked in that long version?
So the long version has all the short version questions too, but the long version also kind of asks some other parameters. So for example, how are people traveling to each other, right? So your family's coming to visit you. We basically say if they're walking or if they're in a or if they're riding a bike, it's a lot safer than say getting packed in on a bus, for example, or getting on a plane to come. So we take into account a few more things around the parameters of the visit. We also do give an opportunity to get more detailed questions about yourself, but also the other people who are participating in the visit as well. And a decision aid is different than a calculator. Decision aid really kind of has a lot more opportunities for you to kind of reflect on what are you doing, why are you doing it. So for example, it will ask you questions like, why are you doing this? And you're like, well, we're getting together for Thanksgiving. That's our plan. And we'll say, well, couldn't you do it virtually? And you might say, yeah, I could do it virtually. And we're like, but so why do you want to do it in person? You might say, because we want to be in person, and that's fine. And it's more the idea that it gets you to think, because it gets you to think about, are there other things that we could do? Because, for example, as you said, you might say, you know, cases are really high right now. This could be quite a risky gathering. We're going to have to do it indoors. There's a lot of people who are quite vulnerable and sick in our family. So maybe we're going to do a virtual Thanksgiving instead. So a decision aid is a little bit different than a calculator, because a calculator just gives you a score and it gives you a chance to reflect on the public health education we share with you, where a decision aid basically reflects on the idea that there's no right answer here, but we just basically want you to kind of think through your visit or the plans you have a little bit more carefully so you can be more confident with the final decision that you make.
And I should say that once you get your response, the site also has lots of good information about those who are at risk and how to lower your risk when you're in gatherings. And as far as assessing the risk, so I had to put in that I live in Ontario. Do you update the data you have? For example, if I said I lived in Alberta, we know that since you developed this, cases have soared in that province. So do you adjust for and take into account the most recent information from the various public health areas in the country?
Right. So we don't have that level of sophistication to say that you could literally type in your postal code and then we can actually look at what the current rate of spread is in your area. So when we're really asking about, you know, what the province you're in, we're really doing that just for demographic purposes. So we understand who's actually using this and where they're from. The calculator itself isn't sophisticated enough to take a look at your part of Ontario or your part of Canada and actually adjusting the risk based on that. What we simply do ask the question is are there COVID cases in your community? Because there are actual parts of Alberta where there isn't any COVID cases in that particular community. And so really we're saying if there's COVID in your community, we've already basically said that's a riskier situation to begin with than having no COVID at all. But really what we're trying to highlight with our calculator is we're really trying to highlight that there's so many individual things that you and your friends or family can do that really impact the risk of getting COVID and the consequences therein. It's not so much, even if you're in an area where there's a high amount of spread, there's still things that people can do to really make sure that that visit is a low risk visit.
Now, some people may have concerns about privacy when they're submitting any information online, particularly when it comes to health. What are the security features of the site? Can you identify those who take part, and is the information used anywhere else?
Absolutely. So what we do, it's a great question. And so what we do is right off the bat, you know, we have all the information and disclaimers saying that we don't actually keep people's information unless they want us to keep it. So at the very end, people can always so we ask people to just know the terms of the site. And then at the very end, we ask them if they want us to not have any access to their information, they have an opportunity to say, thank you very much for letting me do this. You don't get to keep any of my data. But if people do want to submit their data, we let people know the reason why we're keeping the data. We don't have we can't link it back to you, but what we can do is we have your anonymized data and we have your comments, and that can help us build a better tool. It helps us understand who's using it, what sort of questions they have, and it allows us to recalibrate and make the tool more accurate. But certainly we make it very clear for people using the site that once they're done, they can say, we don't want you to actually have any of our data, and then we can't have it. But the funny part is, Lynn, I think about probably like 98% of the people who've used the site have given us permission to have their anonymized data to allow us to make this tool better, because it's a free tool and it's basically something supported by the Public Health Agency of Canada to be something to help us all make better decisions.
Okay. Well, thanks very much for speaking to me again, Dr. Sinha.
No, thanks a lot, Lynn, and good luck with your upcoming visits.
Thank you. Dr. Samir Sinha is the Director of Health Policy Research for the National Institute of Aging and the Director of Geriatrics at Mount Sinai in Toronto. To assess your risk, go to covidvisitrisk.com. And I'll also post a link on 99.3 County FM's Facebook page at the end of the show. You're listening to The Grapevine on 99.3 County FM, the voice of the county.